Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and we have a very, very special guest for you today. We have the CEO and founder of Winning by Design, Jacco Van der Kooij, and very, very excited to jam out and kind of get our sales nerd on today.
Well, it is a pleasure and a treat to be here. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated, Ross.
Of course, of course. Well, before we get into things, I'm sure 90% of folks out there have probably heard of you and Winning by Design, but maybe before we dive in, a bit about yourself and how you fell into the world of revenue leadership and Winning by Design.
Well, yeah. So, for the longest time, I was an engineer creating products, and in the heart and soul of technology with a company called Philips. We worked on selling technology, for which I was creating products. For those of you who are online, you can see this. This is one of those boards I created. Multi-PCB MPEG-2 test environment. Now, what I learned from that is as I traveled the world in order to help companies, I learned that most customers were not buying because I was a salesperson. In those days, I was not, but primarily because I was a person trying to solve their problem with technology. And through that, I learned some very basic mantra of sales. One is that customers hate being sold, but they love to buy solutions. And number two, that it is the customer who always sets the buying experience. It's not the seller who determines how the customer buys. In almost all cases, it's the buyer who determines that. Those two simple principles, I noticed that most sellers that I worked with in those days either did it naturally that way, or if they didn't, they were not very successful salespeople. But most successful salespeople, like selling multi-million-dollar equipment, natively have an intent to help the customer to succeed.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to dig into that and maybe challenge or get your perspective on the customer leading versus the seller leading, and we'll get into that piece. But appreciate the quick intro. And yeah, big fan of the bow tie, which people know of, and the SPICE framework. So excited to dig into, really your three tactics and tips for driving execution excellence is kind of how we talk about it at a core. Basically, how do you help the team execute like those top A players and do it consistently and repeatedly, and in 2024 efficiently, as we like to say. So diving into things, your first point was a team-wide understanding of where growth comes from. From reading your book, I have an idea of what this means, but in your own words, what does it mean to understand where growth comes from, and why is it so important on a revenue leadership team?
Yeah, like the company we are, Winning by Design, imagine that we have helped well over 1,000 SaaS companies, right? And there are some companies in the tens of millions of dollars, and they go all way up into the billions. Those who are published on our website, like DocuSign and Dropbox and HashiCorp. And so think of many large firms that we have helped. What we can tell you is that all across that spectrum, that in most cases, revenue leaders misunderstand where growth actually comes from. And because they misunderstand that, they take the wrong action. Now, as a company grows, it goes through certain phases, and each phase has a certain, approach and requires a certain approach. And to get into the next phase, you have to, in some cases, ditch all that what made you successful in the first phase because it no longer works, right? And the saying is, what got you here will not get you where you're going next. Now, that brings us to the core issue. Where does growth come from?
Yes.
Up to $10 million, growth primarily comes from acquiring new customers. Beyond $10 million, growth starts to contribute mostly from retention. And so if you think of those bar charts, what you see where companies grow from hundreds of millions of dollars, from tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, and you see those ARR bar charts and they get bigger, bigger, and bigger. I want you to understand that at $100 million, on top of that big bar chart, there's a tiny little sliver, like a tiny sliver. That's the growth from acquisition. That entire bar chart, 90+% of that bar chart is all about retention. Now, retention needs to be seen in our business as the same as acquisition. It is an element of growth. Retention has a higher win rate. Let's call that your GRR, your gross revenue retention, but that's a form of a win rate, often exceeding 90% for high ACVs. And for very high ACVs, it may approach 98, 99%. So it has a high win rate. It has an established price. So don't think about discounting 20, 30%. You're often plus minus 5%, 8% increase and so on. You may lose some seats, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And the sales cycle is known, whether that is monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on how you run. But it behaves the same thing. It needs to be closed. The customer needs to be convinced. You need to demonstrate impact to the customer. And if you don't do that, then that customer won't renew. That takes you to about 50, 60-ish million dollars. After that, we will see that expansion sales start to become the driver, and it will start to exceed acquisition. So now acquisition becomes a secondary, even tertiary opportunity. And so now what we have, retention and expansion are now taking place. And if I asked you, Ross, think about, think about what is the largest consulting firm? Name to me a large consulting firm that you're familiar with.
Accenture.
How many, what do you think? What is the coverage of Accenture in the Fortune 500 companies? How many CEOs in the Fortune 500 companies do they know?
498.
498. There is no new acquisition sales for Accenture in the Fortune 500 company, right? Think of Adobe and creative artists. Like how many artists, creative artists use Adobe? Like what, 80+%, 90+%? There's no new acquisition of new. Like now the market will grow, so we may have
you can grow the market
and
share, new products. Yeah.
Right? But therefore, in our world, at around $60, $70 million, you'll see that. The problem here is, Ross, that most organizations stay stuck in the acquisition mode.
Yes.
And you can often see this the best, and it's most where the light shines the brightest of what is wrong when you look at marketing. How much marketing dollars are we spending on acquisition versus retention and expansion? And you're going to find that companies at several hundreds of millions of dollars, they still spend a lion's share of all their marketing dollars and sales resources, primarily on the tiny sliver that grows on top of that little bar. And they're not proportionally spending that. That's number one. If you don't understand where your growth comes from, you don't understand that you need to treat that retention with the same mindset, then you're focused constantly on acquiring. And then in the world of growth at all costs, just keep spending more money on that. And sometimes it feels like you're swimming upstream.
So the big question then is, I was just having this debate with a friend a week or two ago, is why? Why is this the default across so many businesses, right? You're not talking about, oh, why did 20% of businesses do this? It's so crazy. This is the vast majority of companies, even much later stage. Why is that the default? There must be some sort of, human innate thing tied to that, because it's not logical, right? You explain that it's a truism, but still, with knowing that, why do you think companies are still focused on that net new versus growing through their customer base?
Historically, we are built on 100. So if you go back, sales existed before marketing existed. So if you go back, marketing is about 1880 is when marketing really starts to set, there's AIDA and stuff like that all comes from the 1880s or something like that. Now, sales goes a couple of hundred years before that, right? And if you go back at some point in time, some blacksmith was selling some services, but exchanged that in the form of bread. And so there was an exchange of goods. There was no really salesperson, but sales then developed. And what sales primarily started to develop, and particularly starting in the 1960s and 1970s, every quarter starts at zero. Every year starts at zero. You win deals, but because recurring revenue is not an existing thing, every quarter and in those days we started off quarters, every time you start at zero. Meaning, from day one in the quarter, from day one in the year, you got to go acquire. From that, at first, the business model was built that way. The way how compensation was structured was built that way. Comp plans were structured that way. The quota was structured that way. The way we hired people were structured that way. The way we written job descriptions was hired that way. The way we trained managers, the way we trained VPs. This entire thing is a gigantic ball of twine that has been wound up over 100 years of selling this way. And so today, when you bring in a sales leader, most sales leaders says is like, there's all this process. What it comes down to is Can they actually win a deal? When in front of a customer, can they close, right? And then we emphasize that. We give them closing classes. We give them all that. Wow, the best of the best sales professionals. Every time I deal with the top notch in companies, they know closing is a result. That's not a goal. Closing is what follows after you've done all the work well. And whether that is in PLG because you did a fantastic demo, you did a fantastic video on the website, or whether you do that in deep enterprise sales and you spend 3 to 6 to 9 months working with that customer, it's the same thing. Sales is an outcome, not a goal. Mm-hmm. But that mindset of win deals, win deals, win deals, that mindset, which is propagated in popular culture with movies like Wolf of Wall Street, with movies like Glengarry Glen Ross, like pick any age bracket, and there's a movie that shows that salespeople is just get the customer to sign on the line that is dotted. And that mindset with the business model in recurring revenue is flawed. That first principle is as flawed as baseball was before the movie Moneyball came out, before sabermetrics. It is as flawed as playing only basketball with tall players protecting the basket until the Golden State Warriors showed you that the three-point shot, right? That model is as flawed as all these other models. But unfortunately, the systems that have given risen to that originally have not changed yet. The mindset of VCs and founders has not changed yet. The top 10% of founders know this very well. The top 10% of VCs and PE firms know this very well, but they don't try to disclose this to everybody else. They go like, you keep going, because eventually you drive yourself into the ground that way. And that often happens, dependent on companies, but $20 to $30 million, we see a first revenue break point that companies can't keep up. If you make it through because you have a popular product, and $70, $80 million becomes your next break point. And if you keep it then up again, right, because you have unlimited funding, so you can keep hiring, you can keep running more campaigns, you can keep buying revenue, right? You often, in those times, you buy revenue for every dollar of revenue, you spend $5 to acquire that, right? That's how expensive it gets. And at that point, at a certain point in time, it all breaks down.
So it's just interesting because you would think psychologically that the loss aversion of losing existing revenue, you know, because people hate to lose, obviously, would beat out the opportunity gain. But you're right, culturally, you know, how sexy is it to, oh, I just saved that customer. They're spending the same amount as last year. They're spending, oh, wow, they're spending 3% more. That's so exciting. It's not the same, emotion to it as is winning, a huge new contract.
And Ross, if I'm on a quota, I'm going to get paid on that deal no matter what. So why do I care whether it renews or not, right? Now, I can put some penalties in that like I'm going to lose some deals, but that still makes hardly any impact of my commission, right? So it's fantastic that everybody else in the company yells and screams how bad the deal is. I got comped on it. And the comp plans is structured to drive my behavior. So if you're comping me that way, you're giving me quota that way, I'm doing what your plan is telling me to do. So what is I don't have a problem with it. Organizations need to solve that.
So that brings up an interesting question before we move to the second part, from understanding where growth comes from to then how do we establish the right go-to-market processes. But before we move there, curious who you think should own that outcome of the customer. Should it be the AE that sold the deal, that owns them getting to success, right? Because you're saying that, hey, it's the way that it's compensated, blah, blah, blah. It's, they really should feel like they're signing the right customers. How would you suggest then the ownership? Or is it the product? Hey, the thing didn't work. We signed this account, we got the lead in, closed the deal, signed the dotted line. Who's responsible? Is it the product? Is it the seller? Is it someone else?
So imagine you go to you have a flat tire, or you got, like your tire is deflating slowly. You drive to the tire store, right? And let's pick a known brand name store that you know, right? Like an American Tire or something like that. You deal with the person behind the counter, and they tell you, your tire is going to be fixed. Like you sit there on the bench, to come back, you pay that person, but the tire is not fixed, right? Now that person didn't fix the tire for you. He was not the guy in the garage or gal in the garage who did this, right? So, but you're going to hold that person accountable because you paid him. You're not going to go into the garage and go like, hey, who of you fixed my tire, right? You're not going to go and search the person out.
But internally, so not the customer though, but internally at the tire shop. Let's say you're the owner of the tire shop. Do you say, hey, you sold this thing and it didn't work? Or do you go to the back and you say, hey, this person sold a customer, they got the deal done and the thing didn't work. Who are you going to hold accountable?
Okay. It is not about who you are. It's about who is the customer holding accountable. I want you to think of like it's not because the customer doesn't know this entire organization, doesn't know who did what.
I'm talking about solving the problem for that company, right? We're American Tire, we own the franchise. I'm the CEO. I want customers to come back, all this stuff. Do I blame the person at the front who closed the deal, who got a great customer in, or do I blame the person that didn't fix the tire in the back?
Okay, now follow my thinking here. If the customer has a great experience, and it is with Jennifer behind the counter, and they write a 5-star review about that, who do they write a 5-star review about?
If their tire was fixed, Jennifer. If she was a pleasant person and her tire is still broken,
so
no
we're building an accountability. We're building an accountability culture. When things go right, Jennifer gets all the gratitude, and when things go wrong, we are blaming. That's the problem that companies don't get right now. That's the challenge that companies have to build. So when I say like, who's responsible for the go-to-market, who's responsible for the customer, right? I'm going to get the customer success manager who is dealing with highly frustrated customers who have no ability to impact whether the tire gets solved or not, right? And they have no impact. They're not the engineers. This tells you that today there's a significant trend underway that customer success should be split up accordingly. That just achieving, like getting an outcome is not by itself. That customer success, there are parts that relate to the product and should go back to the product. And there's parts that have association with using the product correctly and use cases and application of that and best practices. That is that the CSMs can be held accountable for. But if it's a product issue, there's no need to go start yelling and screaming at the customer success manager, other than offloading stress and identifying the right person to solve that problem. That, like what I believe is we see this transition right now as SaaS is maturing, as recurring revenue businesses are maturing, they come to the realization that, the current customer success organizations and tools associated with the systems and processes are not properly designed to assist what is where growth is going to come from. The same way how sales teams still stay too focused on acquisition, or revenue teams stay too focused on acquisition. It's an organization-wide misunderstanding where growth comes from and applying the resources correctly.
Yeah, so basically you're saying that CS is going to always get blamed for the thing not working or the churn when there's other folks like, the engineer product team, maybe it's there, and the salesperson, when things go well, get the thumbs up, and the CS person, when things go bad, get the blame.
That's right. And so in most cases, now let's not misunderstand that in many cases today, customers are the QA department of software, right? And then customer success organizations are put in between to shield the engineering department from the QA results, right? Like that is a problematic scenario. Why is that? Why are customers being used as QA? Because the high amount of engineering in the short cycles that we're having, every 2 weeks releasing new products, yes, the software infrastructure is capable of allowing for that. But in the end, you and I both know that even the best applications that we're getting are constantly coming out with bugs that seem to be fixed but have caused other issues. In other words, you are simply QAing the product right now.
Completely. It's interesting then the tension between product and CS, who really owns, like, oh, someone didn't go live. Is it because they didn't follow the proper 30, 60, 90, or was it too hard? And that's, I think, a very subjective, not objective answer to those questions, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Totally. Well, let's shift gears. I could talk about that piece all day, but I think some of these other topics that you had as part of the agenda are super interesting, which is, okay, we talked about all the things that could go wrong. How do we think about establishing the correct go-to-market processes from the ground up?
So I'll give you an idea about like processes. So first of all, revenue growth is the outcome of proven, repeatable processes executed in a disciplined way. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there because, like in PLG, executing in a disciplined way is making sure that the technology behind the scenes works quickly. And in a human sales motion, do they have the skill set to deploy that, right? So processes multiplied by the execution of diligent execution. Either one breaks, the other one doesn't matter any longer.
Mhm.
Now, picking the right motion. What is the right motion? What is the right process for you, right? Is it a PLG motion, or is it more of a deep enterprise sales motion? What we notice is that there are very different engines operating. So let me give you an example, and you can help me with that, Ross. If you think of PLG, what are the key elements of a successful PLG motion? If you have a successful product-led growth motion, what is the first thing that you're looking for? What needs to be a successful thing there?
I would say the customer getting to value without needing a person involved in the loop.
That's right. And so the product must work, right? No good product, no good I mean, I can deploy the world's best website with the microsecond clicks, but if the product ain't popular, then it ain't gonna work, right? So PLG, popular product, which often means, like you point out, customer gets to impact very quickly. If I'm buying a product I want and it needs to deliver what I want in seconds.
Just by themselves, exactly. Yeah.
By themselves, right? Like very PLG mode. So product popularity, product is number one. Popularity and word of mouth spreading is what runs that engine. Now, if I go to the opposite side and I go to deep enterprise sales, it is often brand name, trusted brand name. Because I know when I buy a $250,000 piece of software, something is going to break, but I trust that the brand behind it will fix it. Often this is represented by deep expertise, sales engineer, solutions architect, founder-led selling, right? And so on the other side of the PLG motion is expertise and specialist and so on and so forth. Brand name and trust and relationships. That sits on the opposite side. These are two different engines. In the middle sits yet another engine. And you find this, for example, if you look at HubSpot and you look at Outreach and SalesLoft and Gainsight, these companies, they need to generate a certain amount of volume, but they need to do it at a high price. So they use thought leadership. They use great content. They have events like Pulse for Gainsight, or like events that we see that are happening for companies in that space, right? Like I just contributed both to Demand Base, and a few weeks later at 6sense, they have these local events. 6sense was an Inspire event. You bring like 200 people together. So it's very event driven, in which speakers present thought leadership and insights and so on. So now we got three engines. PLG, product, middle of the road to SDRAE, events and thought leadership, and at the high end, we have expertise, trust, and sales engineering and proof of concept drive sales. Three different systems. Each of these systems require that they match your product. So if I tell you HubSpot, what is the number one go-to-market motion that you know HubSpot? What is the number one go-to-market motion that HubSpot is known for?
SMB.
SMB is the target market they sell to. But what motion do they use? HubSpot equates to what?
Channel partners, right?
Channel partner sales, primarily driven by inbound. HubSpot, inbound via channel partner sales. It's a match. If I tell you HubSpot inbound, match. If I tell you Slack, what is the GTM motion that made Slack popular? PLG. Slack, PLG. And I can even tell you that most people that buy a Tesla car buy the car online because they like the online experience so much. In a weird way, buying a self-driving car in a self-buying sales experience, it matches. What we see is that the first go-to-market motion that the customer needs to embrace is that which is a natural fit with the product. HubSpot inbound, Slack PLG. Then you often need to map that up to $10 million. You should not change that part. You should not add too many. So if you're running at $6-7 million and you have a PLG motion and you have an event driven and you have two enterprise sellers, you're going to be spreading all your resources very wide across this. That won't scale very well. Lots of companies get trapped into that trap. And that is because they rotate executives, right? Every 18 months, a new executive in a role, and the next CMO says, oh, we need to go ABM. And then the next VP of sales says, oh, we need to go after deep enterprise sales. We need to stop selling with SDRs in the mid-market. We're going to upgrade a few of those and we're going to sell a multi-million-dollar deal, right? Like, and then before I know it, I got like 5 different GTM motions and we haven't even reached $8 million yet, right? And everybody's spread. It's like the kitchen drawer with everything trashed in there, right?
Totally.
That is generally what happens. That
Interesting.
tells us you need to focus on the right GTM.
One thing from my experience that was interesting, both, at Stripe where we went product led, pure developer, API on the website versus Accord, which is more of a tops down motion, is you don't really know what works until 18 months. You know why? Because it's one thing to sell a customer. It's one thing to see if they expand organically with you or churn. And so I found that the difference between how easy it is to sign someone and figure out those channels is very different. Because we were talking about what makes PLG. It's not just that they buy a loan, it's that they buy a loan and can be successful. And a lot of people think that they want something that they to do themselves that they actually need support on. So that's been something that I found really interesting in terms of figuring out go to market at startups and companies where the best signal isn't just selling it either by themselves or at a high price point, whatever it is. It's actually seeing what happens later. And is it net more helpful to spend a lot of money on the onboarding and post-sale stuff because then they expand and tell all their friends, or can you still sell a lot of deals and they churn? So you're getting these false signals. And that's what I found really interesting around kind of figuring out the go-to-market motion of the company, right?
Okay, now there's a disruptive force right now that is disrupting these GTM motions. And when I explain to you the fundamental reason behind it, and when you start to see it, you go like, then you start to see why PLG is upsetting some of this. And so we currently see, if you go back 30 to 40 years, and let's say before there was the internet, for God's sake, right? Like I know for many of us, like I can't even imagine any longer. But where the role of sales come from, if I go back to what I said earlier, I have the smith selling the baker and they exchanging goods, right? Both know what they're selling, right? Both the smith knows very well, the blacksmith knows what the metal is, and the baker knows what the ingredients are of the bread. But the moment in time that the bread gets transported to another city and the blacksmith has to report that, then the blacksmith personally can no longer relay the information about why that particular piece of metal or the baker. And so they insert salespeople. They insert the middleman, so to speak, or the middle human to make it gender inclusive. And so this middle person now has to, actually what they do is what they manage a discrepancy in the knowledge of the buyer versus the knowledge of the seller. There's a knowledge gap. That knowledge gap, per definition, historically, was in favor of the seller. So if I'm IBM in the 1960s and selling a computer, I know not only more about the IBM computer, but I know why I built that computer, and therefore I can tell the buyer, you need this computer. And the buyer doesn't even know why, but they go like, yeah, it sounds reasonable to me, right? There is a discrepancy, there's an asymmetry in knowledge. Now, that knowledge still occurred in the early days of SaaS. The asymmetry of knowledge favored the seller in SaaS in the early days, so much so that the seller did not have to have the acquired knowledge on what they were selling. All what they required is, this is on the cloud and is going to sell at a fraction of the cost if you buy that same solution from SAP right now.
Yeah. You're already spending this money. It's very expensive. Here's something that's cheaper and it's easier to use. Okay, where do I sign?
Now, AI has not only closed the gap, AI is flipping asymmetry. It is now the buyer who can take advantage of this. It is the buyer who has earlier advantage of AI long before the sellers. Buyers today are already using AI systems to create proof of concepts and to do all that, while the seller is still trying to struggle with, hey, how do I use it to proofread my email to the customer, right? Like, the buyer is already way more advanced because the tools are built that way. It's not like some AI system says, oh, I'm going to build this advanced AI system. No, use ChatGPT, use Gemini. And from the get-go, it benefits buyers greatly. Hey, what are these 3 vendors? How are they different? You can get immediate answers. Whether they're true or not is besides the point. Let that be here for a second. But from the get-go right now, we see that the asymmetry of knowledge is gone and is now favoring the buyer. That is a multitude of issues that contribute to that. One of them is that the current seller in B2B does not have the same level of depth on what the problem and the solution is as the generations, like I'm talking to several generations before, because it was never needed in this case. No need to say like people are stupid or anything. It's not the point. The point is it wasn't needed, so nobody developed this. And now AI is flipping that. And we're going to see a disintermediation of lots of sales professional jobs in that, because AI will do a better job at a lower cost. And when I say a better job, more accurate information over time, but more importantly, in real-time information. You don't need to set up a discovery call. You don't need to set up a meeting. It's on Saturday night. You need some insight. You can get it right away.
But what about what I always think about the job of a seller is very different than sharing information. How I see the job of a seller is having a point of view based on knowing that information, right? You've been at a company for X number of years. You've seen how similar people have, gotten from evaluation and information gathering to success. Your job as a seller is to support them in going from, evaluation, validation, onboarding, long-term success, expansion with the product, and hopefully them getting a promotion from picking your product. Is that not aligned with your perspective of what great sellers do? And how would AI be able to do any of that?
Let me give you an answer to that as follows. Over the past year, how many companies have tried to sell to you something?
Thousands of companies have tried to sell me something in the last year.
How many of the sales professionals were capable to do what you aspired them to do? How many percentage-wise?
Capable, probably 98% of them.
Okay, how many are doing it?
Less than 5.
Less than 5. That's the 5% that will remain a job for all the time being. Let's call that the 20%. The remaining 80% will be replaced by AI in this example.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. My perspective more is they will be a larger percentage will be forced to. I believe that the vast majority are capable of, but like you said, they didn't have to. And why would humans do things that they don't have to do? That's not how humans work, right? We do things that we need to do when we need to do them outside of 5% of people, right? 10%, whatever you want to call it, right? Some number of crazy people like myself that just have the innate need to just do the utmost.
Now understand that these people, much of these will not be replaced in the form of roles. So it's not like, oh, you know what, AI comes in or a person that knows AI. But a popular, like a very popular consultant thing is you won't be replaced by AI. You will be replaced by a person who knows AI, right? A fantastic, sounds super intelligent, like has been said once and copied millions of times, right? It's in a way it's bullshit. Like it's,
where are all those people?
Yeah, okay. And so here's what will happen. Let's say that sales has 12 tasks, pick a number, whatever, 12 specific action, discovery, demo, and so on and so forth. Let's pick 10, an easy number so we can all use easy calculate percentage-wise. On day one, AI will do one of those tasks and say, like, I can do a better job on that. I can do better follow-up. I can do a better summary. So one of the key tasks of the sales process is now being updated with AI, a better form of AI. And most of us today, we can already rely on a good summary post-call. That is already being replaced by, right?
Yep.
Now, the next task can be, oh, maybe AI can help me prepare better for the call. So that task will be eliminated. And then the task will be is like, I will have an AI system on the call. And rather than just note taking, I will ask my AI system, both customer and buyer and seller, say like, hey, what's the price? The customer is asking for 12 seats. What's the current price for 12 seats? And the AI system will say like 12. And what is the particular diagram? And now the AI system is giving me more accurate information in real time. But also, I just replaced 3 out of the 10 tasks. Now, if I do that across 50 sellers, that means I just replaced 30% of my capacity with AI. And that will lead to fewer people having a job and that will lead to the better people floating to the top and staying. Yeah. And while you said it's like 5% today are doing it while 98% can, it will see that 20 to 30% eventually will remain in sales and they will.
Okay, I get the math you're doing. Right? Yeah, you're saying the people that are willing to put in the effort and learn and get there will do it. And those will be the incredible sellers that are partnering with AI to be far more efficient. So then your top sellers can service many more of your customers, providing that top 5% experience, selling experience, without needing the rest of the folks who weren't elevating to that task, right?
Ross, we all have to understand that most people in customer success, sales development, and lead generation functions are there as a catch-all function because they found no room to be anywhere else. They never decided to go into sales and made a career out of it. They just ended up there. And there's a large group of people who end up there. And they don't care. They just go working as a 9-to-5 job. And in that, it's the same way that there was someday somebody was digging a hole with a shovel, and then, you know, like some backhoe come and can they do it better, right? And we're replacing the people who are shoveling. They never wanted to shovel. They just got the jobs paid. Well, we got lots of professionals like that, and I call them professionals between air quotes, who are currently in sales because that's what they end up doing. But we didn't need them that way. You know, it's just like they are currently fulfilling a role as a placeholder that soon will be done by either a more motivated, skilled, expertise person or tools that are better suited for the job. And we're going to be fine. Let me ask you, do you remember there was a writer's strike a year ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, for sure.
And that was about writers feeling potentially being replaced by AI, right? Have you heard yet of the SDR strike?
I have not heard of the SDR strike.
Okay.
You say because they're not passionate about the thing?
Why do you think there's no SDR group that is organizing themselves and organizing a strike?
Against AI? I'm not sure.
Because SDRs don't even want to be SDRs. Like, how many out of the 100 SDRs you met, how many have you met go like, this is my job for life? This is what I want.
It's a training. To me, it's training. To me, it's learning how to engage with customers, being around great sellers and learning from them. It's like, you know, like a trade where you're learning the craft from other folks.
It's an idealistic perspective, but I can tell you most SDRs are not properly trained in order to learn how to deal with customers. They're thrown in, meet the target or get kicked out, right? And I know we have an idealistic perspective.
Yeah, no, they figured out. I'm saying the best ones figure out themselves. We'll do the research. We'll listen to someone like yourself on this podcast or consume other information out there on YouTube, and they'll learn the craft, and then they'll go on and be a seller.
I understand that, but I also think that there's a lot better ways to learn the craft than just being thrown to the wolves with minimal education and a phone list to call, right? And you know, like people that are bought like me or great tops or whatever we call them, and you say, like, yeah, that's the way how I learned it. Yeah, that's the way you learned it when buyers were buying that way. But today, buyers are not buying via the phone. Buyers are not buying via on-site demo. So you're throwing all these young people early on in the career to the wolves and telling them they use these old systems to deliver. It's not fair. Anyway, point being in all this is SDRs are not organizing a strike because they don't even want to do it. So we have large swaths of people performing jobs that are currently only placeholder jobs because sooner or later they're going to be replaced. While the true expertise of selling at every level, at every part of every go-to-market motion from PLG to deep enterprise needs to be properly taught and educated, and eventually experts will come out in that space and they will dictate a premium price over the services that they offer.
So do you think the job of a premium seller, the value of that goes up or down in the new world?
Absolutely. Right now, I'm telling you, there's a number of people who absolutely are willing to pay a premium price for somebody who actually can sell. Not somebody who can say they sell, not somebody with 20,000 followers on LinkedIn that they sell. Don't get me wrong, followers on LinkedIn can be turned into a product, but most people who accumulate lots of sellers cannot sell to those sellers, because the reason why they are primarily so popular is because they talk a good game, but they're not selling, because selling inherently will turn off people. Therefore, your following count go down. So selling is really a complex thing that, you know, like some experts will master. And what that mastering of the process is: education, 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 good understanding from the customer, from the market, deep understanding of the market that you sell into, deep understanding of who is the ICP, who is the ideal customer, what do they care about, and helping them to be successful. And you find this all day long. If you're any form of professional training, you know that there's many trainers out there, but the trainers that you get with is the person who gets you and who knows how to motivate you to get to do what you want to do on a 7 a.m. raining morning when you have to drive 50 minutes through the cold rain in order to get to your exercise, right? And you do that because that person knows how to trigger you.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
sales skill.
And most people don't want to do the hard work to get the payout at the end. So last question for you, because I know we're going a bit over here and I'm sure you got a million things going on. Do you think the difference, you know, you asked me a great question, how many people have tried to sell to me and how many people have had a decent experience? And, you know, honestly, 5% is probably being a bit generous. What do you think the gap is? Do you think it is a skill or will gap? Do you think they can't do it, or do you think they don't want to do it?
I think it is multifold. I think
Sorry, better question. What do you think the driving force of is that? Is there a 50% of that is because of this reason? Do you think there's like a main reason why people are doing things that you probably ask them, say if this is working or not, they probably say no. But why is that the default to the thousands of sellers out there of what my experience is on the other side?
When is the last time you had a fantastic experience, sales experience? Restaurant, gas station, you name it.
That's a great question. Let me think. An amazing sales experience with a human being. I don't buy that many things, Jacco. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking of one. It was an agency that sold me. It didn't end up being a good outcome, but it was an amazing sales experience. It was an amazing sales experience. They did a great job selling. Yeah.
Okay. The number one thing that makes a great sales experience a great sales experience, that the person you work with made you feel that the things they were recommending to you were in your best interest, not
Yes.
in their best interest.
Yes.
And in order to make it in your best interest as a customer, I need to understand your problem very well. And I need to understand that my solution and how it matches to your problem.
Yes.
And so whether it is a doctor, a gas station, like the moment in time that the gas station, you know, like looks at your car and goes like, hey, I see what you're putting the gasoline in there. How is it? What is the mileage per gallon, right? And you have a conversation. You go like, this is not a normal conversation. And he gives you some advice. You go like, there was no reason for him to give me that advice. Like I'll give an example. If you order a wine with your dinner, right? Or if you order, you know, like, and you have the first person who says like, hey, what is the right wine? He says, okay, this is the most popular one. This is what everybody buys. Okay, one. There's another person who says, hey, this is what the restaurant recommends. With that, here's the recommendation. But the real advice that we're looking for is when the person says, look, I had that dish yesterday and I had this wine with it. Now, I like these kind of wines. If you like these kind of wines, which I like, then I tell you, this is the wine for you. Why? It's a personal recommendation from that person. Now, when that person recommends that and you do not like the wine that they gave you, what do you expect? If you get the wine, oh, it's not what I like. What do you expect from the waiter? You don't like the wine he recommended. He recommended, not the restaurant recommended.
For them to feel bad? I don't know. Yeah, to feel guilty about the recommending a wine I didn't like.
You expect that he's going to come with a new glass and potentially
Yeah,
take
exactly. He's gonna feel guilty and gonna be like, you know, I made this recommendation. My bad, you didn't like it. Here's something that I think you'd like. Well, why didn't you like it? Oh, it was this. You don't like tannins? Okay, here's something without tannins. Yeah.
And so when the moment in time that that person recommended it, it comes with a warranty included.
Got it. Yeah,
Right.
that's what you're subconsciously thinking. Okay, even if this person's going to take care of me. That's what I'm thinking about now. Is like, because they approach it in this way, it's going to reflect on how they're going to take care of me after. So even if this thing is wrong to start, we're going to be successful together because it's this person. Yeah.
So now we have a great.
That's AI can't replace that.
Now we have a great
door.
sales professional. Understands your problem. What is unique to your situation? Understands how this specific solution matches up to that. And then if you decide and come to the conclusion it doesn't work out and you pick up the phone, they take care of you. And whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
That there's a success, that it comes loaded with a warranty. That's a fantastic sales professional. That's how I've been taught and raised in sales.
I love that.
That's how I sold to C-level at the largest industries in the world, telcos and broadcasters and whatnot, because they in the end asked for me, if it won't work, will you be here on a Saturday night? And if your answer is no dice, right? If you say absolutely, and those calls are made, like I give you an example on how I answered this. In return, as part of a multi-million-dollar deal that like a person by the name of Jeff, this is an executive at a company called Dish, who bought over the years hundreds of millions of dollars from me. I set up in the 1990s, early 2000, a 1-800 line with an escalation process that says if your system goes down, we will respond, but it will go down, all the way go down, it will hit me. And if it won't hit me, it will go to the cell phone line of the CEO of the company. That's what the end of this tree calls. So if they buy 10, $20 million and Dish goes off the air on a Saturday night, we will get an engineer to work on your case. It doesn't matter what. That's when you buy 10 to 20. Now, with PLG, and I'll give you an example to wrap up. If you see that that is the high end, at the high end, I'm buying product, but essentially what I'm buying is service.
For outcomes.
And I expect product to kind of like be for free.
Yeah.
While at PLG, I am buying product and I expect the service to be for free. So public Q&A, I want to go online right now and search for it. Maybe a chatbot gives me some answers. These are two opposing like forces. They are like completely different mindsets. And so to embrace one and then the other is not something that's often in the DNA of your company. And it takes years to augment that and years to grow. Like Salesforce took a decade to go from like SMB to enterprise. Like look the challenges HubSpot currently is having to go to enterprise, right? Like it's not something you just do overnight. That can take a decade. That's the reason why we say stick in your go-to-market motion, develop that and leverage that to the max, and of course diversify over time, but not at 10, $20 million. Diversification, you should be starting to think in tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, Jacco, this was a ton of fun. This was fun to, I mean, we hit a lot of different areas from, basic go-to-market models to the future of AI and sellers and everything. But no, I love the way that you thought about what the future of sales professionals are, and the fact that for the folks that, I mean, the factor that we are talking about is kind of a give a shit factor. You actually care about the customer. You're actually going to be there and make it work. Like the future is very bright for those sellers. And like you said, there's probably not a lot of options, or you're devalued if you're just one of those people that kind of stumble into it and don't want to get better and don't care and kind of don't obsess over your clients. So that's my big
But
take.
let me give you a preview of the future. Within 2 years, 3 years, when you are internally at the company you're with and you have to make a decision, you won't call on a Salesforce. You won't call on a discovery call. You go to a company's website, app, whatever it is, you engage their bot, whatever their AI system is. And for the first 60% of the process, you will use their publicly available knowledge system to inquire price, product performance, differentiation, competitive differentiators, and whatnot. And you will ping that, and you will dial that system in when you are meeting with your team, right? So just so you can get a correct answer. And then the sales professionals will only be engaged in those last, specific means. The same way that people online today do self-diagnose whether they have a form of a disease or something like that, right? This is no different than where you go online often and you go like, look, I have a pretty serious disease, but I can get pretty deep on insights on that online right now, what I believe I have. And the doctor then steps in and says, you're right, you're wrong, and points you in the right direction. No different in the future for sales professionals. And that doesn't mean that the sales is tarnished or is going to die or anything. No, it just means that we once again come back to a natural state that experts are used for experts, and that today we overpay way too many salespeople with way too much money just because there's no other solution for that. And those people will find new jobs in new parts of the business that which will early on need human power in order to get them to the next level. And it will be nothing bad. It will be fantastic development where we're going.
Totally. Well, this was a ton of fun. Appreciate your perspective. And Jacco, excited to follow along kind of how your predictions track to the future here.
That's right. I say this and I end this on the following note. Folks, I want you all to think about what your business will look like in the next 10 years, because our ability as human beings to look ahead 10 years and accurately predict is pretty decent. Look at, like sci-fi movies and how accurately it predicts the future. So human beings generally can predict the future where we're going fairly well. And if you're an expert in your business, then you have a decent 10 years from now, this is how it happens. Now assume that will happen in the next 18 months.
Totally. Very excited for that. But thanks again. And thanks so much for taking the time.
See you. Bye-bye.